he's one of the better receivers in the NFL. You see a team that brought in Devontae Smith last year, and now all of a sudden you made that a position of strength for the Eagles. So I think you're talking about the way that they transform their roster becomes more important. And this isn't a 30-year-old that you bought in where you're paying him $30 million for the next couple of years and then you wasted your draft pick. This is somebody who's going to be a part of your roster.
Yeah, McMullen, Jody McDonald, your Mac and Mac guys here on Birds 365. Appreciate you streaming in, Birds fans. Got a good guest ready to join us next. He's been on with us before here on Birds 365. I enjoyed the draft guide that he put out the last few years. They went all digital on us this year, so I had to log on to the site to get all the great insights and info and draft reports for all the players in this year's draft. From sportsinfosolutions.com, our buddy Matt Manocherian jumps aboard. Matt, even more importantly than your insight to the draft, are you still happily married?
I'm still happily married. It's still there. Made it, 11 days so far, going strong. No, I couldn't be happier. Thank you.
Yeah. And Matt, it's interesting Jody brings that way. I want to bring this up with you because you have a put, and that's what I love about your experience to put in the scouting part of it and the analytics part of it. And I was reading Zach Keeper, who works for the Athletic in Indianapolis, did something on the Colts draft. And I want to get your thoughts on this because the Colts personnel department they took 4 days off from mid-December through the draft weekend. So that's 136 days in the building out of a possible 140. They go from 7:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. on weekdays, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. on weekends. That's what the preparation is for the NFL draft. So a couple things. How are you still married? Number one, when you're a scout in this league. Number two, personnel guy. We'll bring it locally for the Eagles, who started the process with 10 picks and ended up with 5. Is that like depressing for the personnel department when you do all that work and all of a sudden 10 turns into 5?
Absolutely. The worst thing that I think the most depressed as a scouting department we ever were in New Orleans was when we traded our future first round pick for a current number 2. And basically we went into the next year with our first pick in the 3rd round. So it was like a big, every time you went into a school with a blue chipper, it was like, we have no chance at this guy.
Yeah.
I remember just laughing about it. Oh yeah, that'd be great to actually have to write a report on him. So, you do your work and everything like that. But I would say at some point around the November of that year, it did become really fun because we were laser focused on that 3rd round pick. So there is something fun about that. But yeah, the more gifts you get to open under the tree, the more fun it is as a scout. So absolutely, it's depressing when that happens. What was your question before that? I feel like there was something else.
Just the workload, and I gave you that Indianapolis example of 136 days out of 140 in the building, working 12 hours a day at least.
Yeah, it sounds about right. This is football. This is high leverage, and everybody's trying to win. So people are spending more than 100 hours a week in the office all year long. That's totally realistic. You see, I got married early in May because I was very much planning for the one time of year where things die down a little bit and go as far as that go. The other thing I'll say is I'm very happily married. I'm in the honeymoon phase right now, so I can say that. But I think that for some of these guys that really like to spend all that time in the office and get kind of obsessive about showing their face as opposed to just doing the work, which is what I tend to lean towards, sometimes maybe those guys don't want to be around their families that many hours per day. I think that sometimes you'll see that that's part of what's going on there.
That is unfortunately probably true. We're talking in generalities here, but you might be onto something there. All right. And I do want to give props, John. I didn't see the article in The Athletic you're referring to. Plenty of credit to the Indianapolis Colts staff. because if they stuck it out even after Carson Wentz got to his 75% of snaps taken, and we knew the Eagles were going to get that Colts first-round pick, if they still stuck around knowing that they weren't going down the first-round road, as Matt referenced earlier, it does kind of bum you out a little bit. But since John went there, what do you think of the Colts draft? We're going to get your thoughts on the Eagles draft in just a second because this is Birds 365. But all that time and effort, what did you end up evaluating the Colts draft as this year? Had a bunch of third-round picks, didn't have the first-round pick, took Alec Pierce in the second round. What do you think of the Colts draft?
I think if you're the Colts, it was a little bit of a different situation coming in this year because their roster's in such a place where they're really in win now mode. So I think when you look at a lot of what they did in the draft, they did a lot of bringing in reinforcements, making sure that they have the depth of their roster filled out. Not a lot of guys that I think are going to step onto the field as starters for them right away. But you look at their roster and the way that they kind of stack out now. They've got blue chippers at every level of their offense. They got the three great offensive linemen, really good receiver, really good running back. On the defensive front, right, you got Buckner up front. You got Leonard on the next level. So they've got guys at all sort of levels of the team. It comes down to, is the quarterback going to be the quarterback for making their run right now? When I look into a lot of their picks, none of them really like jump out and I say, oh, I get so excited about Alec Pierce and what he can bring. But I do think these are all guys that'll find roles on their team.
Matt, one team I always talk about in the draft, and it seems this way every year, and that to me is Eric DeCosta, and really goes back to Ozzie Newsome. But I joked about in the fourth round, I think every time I was at the NovaCare complex here in Philly, and every time I looked up, the Ravens had 6 picks in the fourth round. But, they were taking a player, but they were taking a good player. They were taking good value player. I hate to have you grade the smartest team in the NFL, but I threw out 2 or 3 teams at you. Would Baltimore be one of them? I mean, they're so consistent year after year after year.
Yeah, they've, like you mentioned, since Ozzie's been there, right? So since they became the Ravens, they seem to have really figured out this ability to balance sort of finding really productive players in college with finding players that have the athletic ability to be what they want to be, especially on the defensive side of the ball. It feels like throughout the whole time that they've been there, they've been stacked defensively since Ray Lewis and Ed Reed all the way through now. And now you look at, how do they do it? I think they have a better process than a lot of teams in sort of managing the new age sort of information, the analytics, whatever you want to call it, along with the old school of football and not letting one of them get too far out from the other one, where they say they've never been a team that says we're going to pass 80% of the time, right? They're one of the most analytically advanced teams, and yet they're one of the most run-heavy teams. So I think that they have a really good conviction about what they believe is valuable for them, and they stick with it. And yeah, you look at their team this year, and you see an Isaiah Likely coming in the 4th round to them, and you're like, wow, give me some of that. You see Kyle Hamilton, they just let him fall into their lap. I mean, he could be one of the best safeties in the NFL. So, I mean, I'm with you. I think that they tend to do a great job every year, and I'm really impressed by their ability to balance things, because I don't think John Harbaugh is necessarily analytically inclined, but man, he does a great job leveraging the information.
All right, I've got to hopefully give you tremendous props for your grades after the fact, because if you guys are accurate, then you got a happy host here. My 2 teams are the Jets in the AFC and the Eagles in the NFC. Who had the best draft this year as per your info solutions?
Who do we give the number 1 to? That was Nate Cooper that put that together.
That would be the Jets. And who did you have number 2? That would be the Eagles.
Yeah.
So those are my 2 teams. Thank you very much. Best draft, second best draft in the NFL this year. How big dividends do both teams get to cash in on year 1 with the selections that they made this past draft?
I mean, I think when you look at the reason why the rankings come out so well, it's because they got a lot of players that are good players, and not a lot of players that we thought were kind of a waste of a draft pick. So it was the high hit rate combined with some really high value people. Obviously, both these teams had a lot of draft capital. That always helps when you have good draft capital coming in. It helps you have the good, one of the best drafts. But now in terms of the play on the field, we got to see how it all goes, and we got to see how they develop, right? It's one thing to draft the players. It's another thing. Can you develop them into your system? I think we like to think of this game as like you were a good scout because you drafted this player. But, at the end of the day, there's a whole lot more that goes into it once they come in, starting with the mini camps.
With the Eagles, though, Matt, they did lose the volume. But they did pick up A.J. Brown, a proven player. So how does that kind of factor in when you look at the draft as a whole and you're able to spin off significant draft assets for a player that is still very young and proven? How do you guys sort of weigh that when you're measuring draft success?
So, that's not something that we're directly, tying into the draft evaluation per se, but in terms of the roster building, it's obviously huge. You're talking about a guy, what is he, 25 years old?
24, I think. Yeah.
24. So he's one of the better receivers in the NFL. You see a team that brought in Devontae Smith last year, and now all of a sudden you made that a position of strength for the Eagles. So I think you're talking about the way that they transform their roster becomes more important. And this isn't a 30-year-old that you bought in where you're paying him $30 million for the next couple of years and then you wasted your draft pick. This is somebody who's going to be a part of your roster, hopefully for the next 5+ years. So it's not something that I love to do, to give away draft capital in order to bring in a player, because when you look at really the dollars and cents behind it, it's a salary cap league. You have to pay the guy. Right? They gave him the contract, so you have to pay him. So really, you do lose this cheap asset that a high draft pick would become. All that said, this player is so exciting that you kind of have to throw that a little bit out the window. There's a thing where you can talk about all this value, the dollars and cents. Would you rather have one player for $20 million who's a great player, or would you rather have two players for $10 million who are pretty good players? And you could have this debate all day long. At the end of the day, when you get A.J. Brown type players on your team, that's a freaky good draft. That's a freaky good acquisition. And then you start talking about some of the players who were added. When you talk about a Jordan Davis, you talk about a Nakobe Dean. Now you're really starting to talk about a roster that you probably filled 3 starting level positions on draft day. That's hard to do.
Let me ask you about one of those guys you just mentioned. That's Nakobe Dean. I thought he was the best linebacker in this draft. I thought he was going in the first round. He ended up falling to the Eagles mid-3rd round in the 80s. Lots of speculation as to why that was the case. A lot of people who put out mock drafts and evaluations and rankings had him significantly higher than where he was drafted. You guys marry analytics to scouting. Why what was your number coming into the draft? Where did you have him ranked and rated? If it was higher than where the Eagles got him, I'd bet every penny in my pocket that was the case. Why do you think he fell down as far as he did?
I have to double check the exact number ranking, but I know we had him in like the middle of the first round type range in terms of the play. Here, 15th overall 15th. As a player,
and he went 84
overall. We've got him rated as a 3-down starting linebacker. Yes, physically, he's not, a guy who's 6'5" and 240 and bringing all the things that Micah Parsons brings, to the table or anything like that. But in terms of a player that can play in the run game, can play in the pass game, he's been productive. The physical traits, I think, are enough for the NFL level. They're not high end, and so that's what keeps him from being like in that blue chip range and like the top 5 discussion type player. The reason why I think he drops more than everything is that he's got an injury history. He had a labrum, and I think the sort of injury that he had, as well as I understand it from our injury folks that we have at Sports Info Solutions, they put the yellow flag on him during the draft, which meant this is something that could be degenerative. This is something that could have long-term impact. And because of that, my guess is different teams' medical staffs, as they poke and prod him at the combine, he might have been off of some people's boards. He might have been downgraded on some people's boards. And when you have those injury flags, you'll find that as the draft goes on and you're looking at your big board, right, you've got to go across all the positions and you've got it grades from high to low. And you'll see there'll be some tags that stick out up there with the blue dot for the character flag or with the red dot for the injury flag, or in this case, the yellow flag, which is kind of like the caution, not a full stop for us. So my guess is a big part of why he fell was the long-term injury risk. And the good news there is sometimes the injury risk assessments are wrong. And that's all they are, is risk assessments. They're just percentages. And, the Eagles do a great job of playing the percentages and different things like that. They were comfortable with it. From what I understand, they were comfortable with it in the second round, even given the injury flags and the lack of, being a big, tall, rangy linebacker like that. But when you get back to the player, this is somebody who was all over the field for Georgia. You couldn't miss him if you were watching a game last year. If he's got one shortcoming in his game, I think that sometimes you see him get kind of swallowed up by blockers when offensive linemen can get out on him, and maybe he'll have some leaky yardage. He's not like a blowback tackler or anything like that. But, man, this is a guy that is all over the field. I think he'll play as a chase linebacker in the NFL, fits better on kind of the weak side of the defense as opposed to on the strong side there. And I think he plays in the pass game all three downs, calls the defense for the teams by the time he's in his second season probably. I love this pick. I love this player, and I hope he stays healthy.
And that's where Jordan Davis should help as well, Matt, because a lot of those Georgia highlights are Jordan Davis swallowing up two blockers and letting Nakobe Dean get to the football. I mentioned the scouting part with you. I want to go into the analytics part. So we mentioned Baltimore a little bit. The Eagles are known for using analytics or data science very well. Cleveland with Andrew Berry, who was also here. Minnesota now with Kwesi is going that direction. Are you able to tell which teams are using that part of it more when you look at their draft boards and who they selected, how they went about doing their business? Which teams are sort of more open-minded when it comes to that aspect of it?
What's funny is that analytics comes in such different shapes and sizes that if I were to say, do I look at the team that drafts for athleticism? Do I look for the team that drafts for production or something like that? And usually it's not that the most analytical teams are all on the same side of that kind of spectrum of drafting for athleticism versus production. It ends up being that different analytical teams and different old school teams have different amounts that they care about kind of traits versus on-field production versus character versus injuries versus whatever else. What I think we see is that the teams that we know to be more analytically inclined, they tend to have a little bit of a more consistent process. So when you look at the decisions that they make, it usually does a good job of fitting into the sort of script that they've written for themselves. It's rare that the Browns make a move that's just totally head scratching, that doesn't seem like something that fits what they would do. But then there are teams like the Packers. The Packers, I would say, are middle of the pack in terms of how analytically focused they are. They do some things, but they're not obsessed with it. They're obsessed with the Packers way, the way what's got them to be such a successful franchise for 70 years or whatnot. So with them, we see almost all the way in terms of we want athleticism. Athleticism. That's what they draft for. It's somebody who can test well at the combine, or somebody who, when you look at the computer vision and you can see who's the fastest change of direction people, stuff like that, the people with the most wingspan with, height, weight, speed, we see the Packers drafting those people. And it's not to say that they're analytically inclined or that they're more old school minded. They're just very consistent in that philosophy. So the answer to your question is yes, you can see the differences between the teams, but the differences don't tend to manifest themselves like the same way we look at NFL teams. Yeah, the Ravens are more run heavy, even though they're more analytical. How do you square that? Well, it's consistent with how the Ravens like to build their football team and what they believe in. So you've got to build your quote unquote analytics to match what you're trying to be as a team, right? If you set a KPI, if you set a goal for yourself, I want to be this good at third down pass rushing, whatever it is, well, then you've got to create a process that gets you there. So usually that's how I see it. When I see teams that make a lot of head scratching moves, more often than not, those are your Dave Gettleman shoot by the hip. One year we're trading all of our draft picks away. The next year we're just trading down. Like, what's his plan? I can't tell, because there probably really isn't a great one. When you look at a Howie, right, there always seems to be, sometimes they'll make a move that takes you back a step. Oh, we're trading for AJ Brown? I didn't know we were a buyer like that. But it fits, right? It fits with the vision to be a really strong passing team. We feel like we have what the rest of the offense built the way we need it to be. We needed another weapon there. Let's upgrade that position and let's go try to win a Super Bowl. So that tends to be the way I look at it, if that makes sense.
I do want to ask you another Eagles draft question on Cam Jurgens, their second-round draft pick. Talked to, I think it was Tony Pauline, who I know you'll know because he's been doing draft stuff for decades, told me that he thought he was the best center in the draft, even above and beyond Tyler Linderbaum, who was drafted before he was. If you're going to get the best center in the draft, and you're going to do so in the second round, I don't know how you can knock the pick other than he's not going to need to step in and play year one because Kelsey's still in place. How did you rank the centers? What kind of a grade did you have on Jurgens? Did the Eagles get value with where they took him in the second round?
Jurgens was the guy that we didn't love as much as some of the others. I think when you look at him, I'm a Linderbaum guy because to me, I've seen it on the film, and I'm a real sucker for production, right? We talked about how different teams value different things. I'm a real sucker for production, and I think he's got the athletic characteristics that you need. Center is not you don't have to be the most athletic, biggest, strongest, whatever, in order to do that. Now, so Jurgens ranked as our fifth center overall.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and he's should be an average type starter by his second season. We would think. We see him as a okay player, a good player, a starting level player, just not somebody that elevates you. Now, what I think you like about him is some of the athletic upside. Right. Whereas a Linderbaum, maybe it's not as much there. This is somebody who's really an explosive athlete. And if you're trying to build in the Kelsey mold, if you're trying to find somebody that you think you're going to make the heir apparent and can develop into that, there's some good clay to work with here when you talk about just the movement ability of a Cam Jurgens. I think that's what elevated him to the Eagles, to why they looked at him. I would like to see somebody who I think has put it together a little bit more. And I would feel more comfortable coming in right away. But, I don't hate the pick because I do think that there's a vision there and there's a path to seeing how he could become, if not a great offensive lineman, at least a very good one.
Matt, do you think teams get too caught up at times, when you have a player like Jason Kelsey and he's gotten to where he's gotten through this unique athleticism, and nobody saw it coming as a 6th-round pick, let's be honest. And they say, well, let's go get the most athletic center. I remember when the Vikings traded Randy Moss and they drafted Troy Williamson because he could run, and how'd that work out? Do you get, can you get too caught up in traits of great players and let's just get the next Jason Kelsey when there probably isn't the next Jason Kelsey?
Yeah. Well, that's one. Absolutely. You can definitely get trapped in that. I've seen it happen so many times. I can remember, Sean Payton, for example, when I was down in Miami, in New Orleans, at times it would be, I don't need that. I need Colston. I don't need that. I need Lance Moore. Like you think about an archetype of something that's worked for you in the past and you know how it fits into your system and you sort of want that same thing because you know it'll work out well. And you can trick yourself for sure. You can start watching the college film and you can start saying, ooh, I see Kelsey there. Ooh, I see Kelsey there. And that's why we like to ground things in more of a process. Now, I will also say this is all a probabilities game. This is all, we don't know anything about how these human beings are going to develop. Heck, I don't know what I'm going to eat for breakfast tomorrow morning, let alone how a 22-year-old kid is going to develop over the next 3 years, right? There's a lot of variables here when you talk about that. But you can also do the opposite. You can get too much into what you have seen and you can forget about how important traits can be and how important it is to kind of build your team aspirationally. So if you want to be a heavy zone blocking offense, if you want to do a lot of this RPO stuff, and you want to have somebody that can really be a move center for you, I don't want to say that it's necessarily wrong. I think more often than not, you can lead yourself down the wrong path, but also, broken clock is right twice a day.
All right, Maddie, I want to ask you about a team you just referenced where you used to work, New Orleans, because John and I have kind of debated Mickey Loomis's draft strategy, or off-season strategy, I should say, since the season ended. John questions as to whether they're a little too over-aggressive to be going for it now. I get it. I like when teams go for it rather than take 3 steps backwards to take 5 steps forward down the road. Traded with the Eagles, got an extra first-round pick, traded again to get Chris Olave, went up and aggressively pursued him. Got Trevor Penning from Northern Iowa with their second first-round pick. I think the Saints have actually had a pretty good offseason, other than Coach Payton walking away. I like the upgrading they've done with their roster. Are they a now team? Did you like their draft?
I'm probably scarred from too many drafts with Mickey where he did just what we talked about before. He went from 10 picks to 5, or he traded away the future first rounder. So I'm still scarred from that. I don't like the trade ups. I don't like the sacrificing future assets. I think the Eagles should be happy to have their assets kind of in next year as opposed to this year, given where they're at as a franchise, right? If Jalen Hurts can't be that dude this year, then you'll have some of that ammunition that you'll want with a lot of the rest of the roster in place. So I prefer to be on that side of things. But this is Mickey. This is what he's done. This is what he's done in free agency. He spent and spent and spent, and we'll figure out how to restructure it if we need to in the future. It's cost them some players that they haven't been able to keep. You look at Hendrickson playing for Cincinnati in the Super Bowl, and you see that was a player directly that was, the expense of this. But then at the same time, you pencil in Olave as a starter, you pencil in Penning as a starter. That helps a lot to replace the loss of Sean Payton. They also lost their left tackle. What's his name?
Teron Armstead. Good player.
Yeah.
Very good player.
So, I mean, you win one, lose one there. Penning being more, I think, ready in the run game, where Armstead was more of a player who excelled in the pass game. I like going in. I'm with you. I like going at it and trying to win because what else are they going to do? Like Sean Payton's going to be in Dallas next year or in Miami if Tom Brady can buy the team or whatever they're saying. So Sean Payton's not walking through that door.
Yeah.
So you better figure out a way to get your offense going, get the polished receiver in Olave, get the high upside tackle in Penning, and try to win. I think Mickey probably is in a spot right now where he's saying, we've been in win now mode for about 10 years. We're going to stay in win now mode until I'm out of here. And it'll be the next guy's problem. Then they'll have that cleanup year at some point where they'll have to deal with the books and they'll have to do that. But just because Sean Payton left, I don't see why he should feel like he has to do that right now. If I was the owner, maybe I would be a little bit more feeling that way. But as in his role, try to win.
He is Matt Manocherian at Matt Mano on Twitter, NFLDraft.sportsinfosolutions.com. They do tremendous work, Matt. You know how this works, as certainly when the draft is going to 3 days, you get that first round, everybody sits back overnight and they say, wow, so-and-so is still on the board. Do we want to move up and get him? Same thing, day 2 to day 3. So I want you to put on your GM hats, and I'm giving you the first pick on day 3 of the draft. Who was the guy that Matt Manocherian would have been pounding the table for when the 4th round started? Because I want a diamond in the rough. I know I'm putting you on the spot, but I want
you're making me go back in time. I'm trying to remember who was there that I liked.
Maybe.
I'm trying to think who we had way up there that hadn't been taken yet.
I'm gonna give you the names. So, generally, how people kind of reset their board. They get all excited. They say so-and-so is still on the board and that kind of stuff. So, it ended up being, let's see, who was the first pick in the 4th round? It ended up being Cade Otton, the tight end from Washington. Then Damian Pierce came off the board, Perion Winfrey, Kobe Bryant, the quarterbacks, by the way. None of the quarterbacks.
Kobe Bryant was a good one there. Kobe Bryant making it to the 4th round, I thought was a pretty nice pick there. the other
Yeah.
corner out of Cincy.
Yeah, the big tackle from Minnesota, who's got
So
Jordan Mailata like size.
the guy that I would have liked is actually a guy who came up earlier when we were talking about the Ravens, Isaiah Likely, the tight end out of Coastal Carolina. He would have been the guy, I think, for me, that I would have been the most hot on at the first in the fourth round. Somebody who I thought should have come off the board on day 2. I think he's going to be an impactful receiver in the NFL this year. Get him on your fantasy draft if you can. This is a guy who's going to come in. He's going to be more of the move tight end. He's going to be somebody who immediately brings pass catching ability and run after the catch ability, I think, to their offense. And they love to get the ball to their tight end. So I think it's a good fit there.
Yeah, that helps as well. They love getting the ball to the tight end. So that helps as well. But, now that I say it real quick, I'll follow it up with the quarterbacks because we talked about it the entire time. This is a weak quarterback class. Well, the NFL stamped that, basically. I mean, the NFL validated that. It was Kenny Pickett and then not another quarterback till the third round. Did that surprise you, just how down the NFL as a whole was on this particular quarterback class?
It didn't surprise me from watching the players. I kind of felt the same way. There was nobody I was really excited about as a first rounder. Our highest ranked quarterback was our number 42 player in the draft. So that part didn't surprise me. What surprised me was that the teams actually kept their discipline about it. They just, you see every year the Daniel Jones picks and things like that, where I don't think he should be picked at number 6 overall, but it happens anyway. And, each of these quarterbacks, I think the warts were just there enough with each of them, whether it was just Malik Willis is such a project, and Kenny Pickett, what can we really develop him into? And you go down the list and you see, there's either a limited upside or a big hole where you're really not sure if it's going to come through with each of these guys. And for the first time I can remember in a long time, the teams really kept their discipline and didn't go reach for anybody. So that was the surprising part for me, not the evaluations. I think if you watched, the evaluations were what they were. And hey, we'll all be correct that this is a poor quarterback class until Tom Brady, is 199th overall, and then it's a great quarterback class, right? But given what it was, that part wasn't surprising to me. It was that the positional value of quarterbacks didn't transcend that to the point where you at least saw more guys go on day 2.
Forget about the first pick in the 4th round. The key was the first pick in the 6th round when the punt god went to Buffalo.
Yeah.
Not Araiza. And
third punter off the board, right?
That's unbelievable.
Still can't believe that's the way it shook out. All right, I want to follow up on John's question. Last one for you, Matt. Looking forward, and we hope for the Eagles' sake that we don't have to deal with this, that Howie Roseman just has an extra asset that he can play the move up, move down game with, that he's not having to desperately bundle them to get in position to take a quarterback next year. Next year's quarterback class as compared to this year's quarterback class. You gave us a great rundown on where they were and the fact that the NFL stood its ground and didn't overdraft quarterbacks. How good is next year's class compared to this year's class? No, we got a whole year to do it. And if I'd asked you this question a year before Joe Burrow had the year he had, you would have told me day 3 pick at best. He ended up being the number 1. So I know it's an unfair question because we need to watch the entire year, but we do it all the time, analyze in advance. How good do you see this upcoming year, the 2023 draft, for quarterbacks?
Yeah, better than this year. Better than this year is the short answer, which is partially just this year's class was not very good. I don't see this being a transcendent quarterback class coming up, but a couple guys that get you really excited. One certainly at the top is Bryce Young, coming out of Alabama. We've all seen him play. He's very exciting. He's when you watch any of the Alabama players on film this year, he's somebody that keeps catching your eye because this is a legitimate quarterback prospect for the NFL. Now he's small. He's very small. So that's going to be a thing, and that's going to be the debate that comes up with him. I think he's athletic enough and he's talented enough where he's still going to be in the mix for a very high pick overall. I will say that, though, if we had this conversation a year ago, it would have been Sam Howell that we were talking about as a potential number 1 pick. And the Oklahoma quarterback couldn't even make it through the season as the starter.
Spencer Rattler, yeah.
Right, Spencer Rattler was the other guy that was being talked about. So that's how maybe little we know about where we'll be a year from now on any of these guys. But I do get excited about Bryce Young. I get excited about C.J. Stroud. And I think just generally after the COVID year led to like a weird texture of the draft where we had a lot of very good players in last year's draft, but not a lot of players. And then we just had a lot of players in this year's draft, but maybe not a lot of the super high end ones because they came out a year early. I think we'll get back to a little bit more of a regular-ish cycle next year.
And we will certainly be having you on leading up to the draft, right before the draft, after the draft. You can't get married on us again, so we'll have you on even more.
It's a one-time thing.
Hopefully so for you, buddy.
So.
Matt, always a pleasure. You give us good info whenever you hop aboard. Thanks for coming on. We'll be in touch again real soon.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Matt.